Hello, I'm Mary V. Today, let's talk about getting some flexibility into your bow hold. So it's not just about flexibility, it's about the right kind of movement and flexibility we're talking about. So mechanically, if we're very rigid, there's a lot we cannot do with the bow. We can't actually bow straight. If we're not moving anything here and it's just rigid, we're not able to play a straight bow because there's no adjustment here. So we have to follow the natural movement of the arm, which is round. And of course on the violin we need to make a straight bow. So that's the first and major reason why we need to introduce quite a lot of movement and adjustment in the arm, the wrist, the fingers, the elbow. So why is it so important to have movement and cushioning in the bow hold? Well, it's really to do with the length of the bow, because as we come to the tip, our hand needs to turn like this, and then when we come to the heel, it needs to turn like that. So we need a movement that accommodates the length of the bow, right? It's just a small movement, but it's called pronation. And it means that we're turning the wrist slightly, a hand, to accommodate the length. So let's just take how to play a straight bow from the heel to the tip. So the first thing to notice is that when we're at the tip, the shape of our wrist changes, and when we're at the heel, the shape of our wrist changes again. So that's a movement that must take place, right? So that's in fact the first thing to practice if you can. So different parts of the arm are involved in different parts of the bow, the forearm and the upper arm. So let's have a look at what the upper arm does. When it's at the heel, the upper arm is very much involved in the stroke. It's lifting up a little bit, you see? So the forearm is really leading the stroke all the time, and it's simply a movement of the upper arm that's following the forearm. So that's a good way to think of it. So the forearm is leading, but because we're at the heel, the upper arm has to move, right? And then we come to a certain point where it's just the forearm really, and we get a lot of movement of the wrist to accommodate the length of the bow, right? So have a look at my wrist. And if you think about the forearm leading all the way down and all the way up, and the arm has to follow. It doesn't lead anything or put any weight on anything. It just has to follow what the forearm is leading it into. So you've got the wrist changing shape, the role of the forearm and the role of the upper arm. So now let's have a look at the hand and the fingers and how they move. And if we place them on our other arm and we drag up and down our arm, we can see that the wrist and the hand is really following the movement of the wrist, you see? So the movement isn't coming from the fingers. The hand is moving from the wrist side to side, right? And the fingers are simply following that. This is very helpful to get a little bit of movement going and the correct kind of movement going. So you can see that because the movement is up and down and there's a sort of drag factor with the hand, that the wrist is like a hinge that's allowing the hand to move from side to side. So try that for yourself, either on your arm to make it really, really clear. Once you can do that, try it in the air. And notice the fingers aren't really leading anything. It's really, think about leading with the forearm. And that movement is making the wrist act like a hinge. And then the hand is simply following like underwater. So that's the mechanics of it. So let's apply that to the bow. A very useful way to think about bowing is push and pull rather than up and down. So pull is a down bow, and it's great because it reminds you to vibrate the string clearly and firmly. So do that and think about your forearm. And as you go down towards the tip, think about how your wrist changes shape. And then do a few movements like this, where the hand is following what the wrist and the forearm are doing. They're the leaders of the stroke, and the hand and the fingers are the followers, as well as the upper arm. Right? So it's a great way to think about it, is sort of actually underwater like that. Right? So once you've tried those things, just do some bows and possibly in front of a mirror, and try to work out individually what each part of the arm is actually doing. For example, some people may not allow the upper arm to take part in the stroke. That's pretty common, to leave it very low, and it looks like this. So there's an exaggerated curve in the wrist there. There's very much a lack of control. You're not going to be able to have much power and control at the heel there if your hand is like this and your arm is like this. So the upper arm is important. The elbow is to take part in the stroke, especially on the way up. Let it come up like that. That's why it's good to work in front of a mirror. Have a look at what your style is, what you're actually doing. So if you can get some wrist movement, that would be fantastic. That's the beginning of loosening off from this rigidity. And you can see how important the upper arm is in allowing the wrist to change shape, right? If the upper arm is left behind, the wrist is forced to take a lot of the burden and the work. You'll never get a really good sound from that. It's very restricted. So let your arm come up parallel. Keep this straight, right? It's pretty straight, okay? So everything should come from one source, which is really the forearm and the wrist, with the forearm leading. So you'll also notice that I'm moving my violin along with the bow. Very helpful for our muscles to sort of equalize movements. It's almost like breathing. Also, it's helpful for me as a smaller person, 5'1", to enable myself to reach the tip. Also, there's much more elegance and natural movement in just moving the instrument and the bow together. It increases potential for musicality. So now let's just have a quick look at the fingers. They do facilitate the movement, and there are extra movements in the fingers sometimes. You know, the fingers don't have to move extremely, you know, it just leads to a loss of control. And when you're doing a down bow, Your fingers should really look the same as when you're doing an up bow. You know? So go in front of the mirror and see if you can do that. But the secret of the finger movement is how loose the bow is inside the hand. Again, go back to just experimenting with the fingers, and this time make them a little more active. Thinking about at the heel, there's more cushioning with the fingers. There's more movement. But the hand isn't really changing shape dramatically. Really, if you can think about the wrist, it's very important because the wrist enables the hand to move correctly, to flow, to cushion, to give power. Miming is extremely good for bowing. Miming without the bow. And get your wrist to move, get your upper arm involved. Get the flow of the hand in front. You can exaggerate this, that's the great thing in miming. Get your body moving. And in miming, you can even sway the violin a little bit, and you'll find it's better for your back to use the muscles together like that in sort of symmetry. And it does feel like that once you get it going. So much of our music making will depend on overcoming this rigidity. If you know what the important parts are, the forearm and the wrist, and get everything else to fit that, that's a good way to think of it, like that. So I hope something in this video will help you, and I hope you get on well with your bowing experiments. And I'll say bye-bye for now. Bye.